Perfect. Welcome again to the OSN June Showcase, Unlocking Futures, Revolutionizing Education and Hiring with AI. So again, throw those questions into the chat and let's go ahead and begin. So we want to share our appreciation for the funding provided by Walmart that helps to make the work that the OSN or the Open Skills Network does possible. So thank you. Now, well, we have a few announcements to start off. Be sure to follow us on LinkedIn, Twitter, and YouTube for the latest happenings and to continue today's conversation or start a new one. If you're not a member of the OSN, join today. It's free, and your membership unlocks a whole community of conversation and practice in the world of open skills. Within our community platform, you will have access to playbooks, work groups, and a robust community of practice to engage deeper on skills in hiring and education and the technology that's being built to support this brave new world. So join us. Now, remember to place your questions as they come up into the chat for us to gather and answer as we go. We appreciate that. And I'm going to hand things over now to Christina Caldwell, our amazing community engagement manager, who is going to introduce our panel and begin our journey into revolutionizing education and hiring with AI. So take it away, Christina.
Thank you so much, Christian, and thank you to our panelists. We will start with Nate Otto. He is the founder of Skybridge Skills, and he is also a co-lead for the OSN Technical Work Group. We're excited to hear from Nate. Then we also have David McCool. He is president and CEO of Muzzy Lane. He is also an active OSN member and a guest blogger. So we're excited to have Dave join us today on the panel. And we have on the employer side, we have Brian Kane. He's the founder and CEO of Social Purpose Corrections. And he's going to speak to us from the employer perspective and share his insights on ChatGPT and how it has changed the way he does business. So let's start with Nate Otto.
Thank you, Christina, for the introduction. I'm very excited to be here supporting the work of the OSN and exploring this particular topic, the intersection of the new generation of AI tools and our concept of open skills that we work with here. All right, so I do have a lot to talk about. We're going to go really quickly here. I've got about 5 to 7 minutes because I want to save a lot of time for the discussion with my fellow panelists. I'm going to talk about how AI tools can be used by a developer today as part of the practice. All right, so there's a new generation of AI tools here. We use AI, artificial intelligence, to describe them, but they are more accurately a set of machine learning algorithms that use training data and contextual clues to generate new content that fits with the context that you're putting stuff in. ChatGPT is one of these examples, and this type of model is being integrated into more and more tools worldwide. And so we have, in 2023, this experience of rapid progress in AI tools suddenly being available at our fingertips in our browsers and in the other applications that we use. I am a developer, and I use integrated developer environments such as VS Code, and I program primarily in TypeScript. So I've been using a tool called GitHub Copilot in that environment. I also sometimes use command line tools that take advantage of these language models. Copilot has one of those called Copilot CLI. There's also, you can access these large language models by API to integrate them into the applications that you're building. But that's not what I'm talking about today. I'm mostly going to focus a little bit on an introduction to how a developer can use these tools to enhance their practice of building software, whatever that software might be. Go ahead to the next slide. We also see AI, coming into our lives through ChatGPT and the web chat interface and search engine result pages, where these tools can summarize a set of results for you right on that first page you see after asking the question. So before you even like link to the original raw material that generates those answers. For a developer within the environment, what this looks like is that I get real-time hints for code that I could write that is based on the model's understanding of what good code has been written in the past, as well as the context that it's sitting in. Where's my text insertion point in the code? And what code surrounds it. It tries to get a sense of what is the intent for what could fit here that is the next step. And so this looks like these real-time suggestions with what they call ghost text, this gray text that appears right at your insertion point. And all you can do is hit tab to complete, or there's a couple other keyboard commands that allow you to partially cycle through different possible suggestions and select parts of the suggestion. Next. So here's an example of from some code I was writing yesterday. I was writing a little API endpoint for a SvelteKit app in TypeScript, and I was doing some content negotiation where I was going to return JSON for one view for a computer who wanted to get JSON data, and I wanted to return HTML data for a client that was requesting an HTML page to present to a human. Perfect example of information for human and machine readability that we talk about often in this world of open skills. And so the gray text that you can see on there is a suggestion being made by the GitHub Copilot tool. And it actually is pretty much exactly the suggestion that I wanted. I would start with a really simple model for this content negotiation feature, and then I can make it more fancy over time. But I started by parsing out the headers, splitting them up, and then the tool suggests, oh, here's a way you can detect whether the piece that you want is a client requesting HTML. And I can hit tab and just suggest or accept that solution. Go ahead, next. So it's important to note that this type of experience for a developer is not a brand new thing for a developer. We have tools written into our development environments that do this type of auto completion already. I work in TypeScript, and that allows for me to specify data structures and the requirements for different pieces of those data structures, so that if then I try and instantiate one of them and I miss a piece or I get something wrong, put a number where a string piece of text should be, my tool can tell me, oh, I did that wrong. I can correct that error. It can give me those hints. And it can do tab completion already for a lot of the symbols that are used within the code. So doing tab to complete for an additional use case or set of use cases that the GitHub Copilot offers feels very much like using the tools that are already built into the IDE, and really benefits from my learning how to use those tools efficiently. It also feels like pair programming with another human. It works just like talking to another human about what you might write next, except that it's a lot faster and a lot more specific. Another tool that I've used recently in VS Code has been a human pair programming extension from Microsoft called, I think, LiveShare, that enables two people to be editing the same code on their own computers from their own homes, just like we edit collaborative docs in Google Docs or Office 365 today, except it operates with the sort of full intelligence about what that code means that the IDE provides. This kind of dual aspect of this experience, where it's kind of like working with a human who is making suggestions for what you could write next, and it's kind of like working with the code analysis based tools that we're already working with, feels really natural. But it does also take a lot of learning and practice, muscle memory to get good at it. And so being very good at using the keyboard commands within your IDE is very important for a developer to be able to work with this efficiently. Quality of suggestions is much better for popular languages like TypeScript that I work in. If you work in a really niche language, it might be a couple years before these tools are really up to speed. Next. All right, so code and quality. We've heard a lot of talk about the quality of the suggestions that come out of these AI models. And when what you're generating is code instead of prose, those same caveats apply. you have to actually be a pretty good developer in order to be able to understand the code that is being suggested to you, sometimes when it's not quite the code that you would have written yourself. And it's important to know that you're in control of your code. You can choose to reject suggestions. The tool will happily suggest a different alternative for you if you don't like the logic that it put together. But these suggestions are also an opportunity to learn some new things. Like I was learning some new methods like flat map in the JavaScript object and collections APIs, because the AI tools were suggesting that I use slightly more efficient tools than I had previously, had a lot of experience working with myself. Next. And so we're going to talk a lot this hour about what does this mean for our understanding of what skills are needed to be a productive or happy employee within the workspace. Within the workplace. As a developer, there's a bunch of brand new skills that are coming into existence to be able to work with tools like GitHub Copilot well. And we are developing these skills, and the work is requiring these skills maybe faster than we are even developing the words to describe them. But don't give up, because communicating about skills and giving names to them is a form of language that is really important for us humans to be able to coordinate with one another about how we use technology. Next. And so my final slide is sort of some key points where I'm at in terms of thinking about the impact of AI as a business owner and a software developer. I'm seeing that these tools are already saving me a lot of time and improving the quality of the code that I write. And also, we're just getting started. The experience that we're having today is just the tip of the iceberg in terms of how we can adapt to this type of auto-suggestion, autocomplete interface in our human-computer interaction. We're saving tons of time already, and there's a huge potential ahead. So I think that organizations that take AI seriously are going to want to act to make sure that the benefits of AI are flowing to the workers. A really key way to tell whether your organization is taking the promise of AI seriously is in understanding how much time these technologies will save workers. It's time to adapt your organization to a 4-day work week and save workers additional time, return the benefits of AI back to the humans, and give us that time to recharge from all the mental energy that we're now spending in interfacing with the tools. So I'm excited to talk with the rest of our panelists about some of these ideas and the impact on open skills.
All right, thank you so much, Nate. We will continue with Dave McCool, President and CEO of Muzzy Lane.
Hi, everybody. I'm Dave McCool. Great to be here today. Been great to be involved with the OSN over the couple of years since I started up. So we'll sort of take it a level up from where Nate was. So I'll talk about more from a feature, kind of a product manager view of using AI in educational products. We are primarily a tools and content provider for skills-based learning assessment and credentialing. We've been around for about 20 years. It's sort of interesting thinking about the panel that our early days, we did a lot of large-scale strategy game development for education and for entertainment, and there was a lot of AI in those products back then. A lot of it hand-coded. There were some tool sets available, but not much. But this sort of, we hadn't been doing a lot of that for a while till recently. With a lot of this has come back, so it's really interesting to see it coming back. And I'm going to talk about two things today. So we are using AI in one way, and we're experimenting with another way. So like I said, we have a tool set for partners to build their own active learning content simulations. We're now building something called Skill Build, which is active learning simulation-driven courseware leading to credentials. And that's where we're using AI today. So we're using it today for coaching. So there's a coach in the product itself, which helps guide you through the experience. And then we're experimenting with it for tutoring. And I'll get into that a little more in a second. Next slide, please. So coaching, this is what we're doing today. It's very much more traditional machine learning style AI. There's really three pieces. When a learner comes into a skill build course, they meet their coach. The coach starts to get to know them, and the coach is who's going to guide them through this active adaptive learning experience. And They're going to do two things. So first, collecting data on students who have gone through these courses and helping those to feed just a general recommendation map of what's the optimal way to get this student to mastery of the skills that this course is currently teaching and measuring. Not all students come at the same level. Some may already have all those skills and they just really need the credential and the validation. Some may need to actually develop those skills along the way. So that's kind of the base level map that the AI is building. But it's also sort of interacting with each learner as they come through and personalizing that to what that learner would work best for that learner. We're all sort of different. We have different goals, different tendencies. So risk aversion is a good one. Are you someone who really wants to just dive in and start taking the assessments and you're okay if you're failing and then figuring out where you should remediate? Or are you someone who really wants to sort of make sure you've sort of been exposed to everything first and you've gotten a chance to practice before you do assessment because you don't want to fail that assessment when you go forward. So that's an important thing. And then the third piece is providing that connection to the real world benefits. You're in a course, you're in, say, a critical thinking course, you've just mastered identifying core issues, which is a key component of critical thinking. What did that do for you? Like, let's connect that directly. We call it jobification. Let's connect that, use the AI to kind of scrub the world, go out to Burning Glass and other places and bring it back and say, here are job opportunities that are kind of matched into what we've learned about you so far, where that skill you just learned is going to help you here, or it's going to help you there in life and in your career. So that's what we're trying to do, is use that AI to sort of bring those benefits back in to the learner as they're going along, both for motivation and just purpose. Next slide, please. And then the other thing we're experimenting with is much more sort of with where all the headlines are today with ChatGPT and other generative AI solutions is these are fundamentally role play simulations and storytelling. And so obviously these chatbots could play a huge role there. So we're experimenting with that. Our courses have three sort of fundamental different content blocks in them. There are assessments, there are practice activities, and there are tutoring activities, which are delivered in a mix by that coach based on the recommendation map. In tutoring, we're bringing AI in. It's a great place. Tutoring are the activities where if there's a skill or skills that you just really don't seem to have you don't know the basic concepts of yet. You don't really understand how to detect bias, for example. Those are going to take you through the basic conceptual level in an active learning style, and bringing generative AI in there to just make that richer and have that rich conversation about what are the concepts behind bias, what is bias, is it good or bad, should I want it, should I not want it, help make those just more interesting experiences for them. And then when you come up to the practice activities, which are sort of like scaffolded assessments, you're now in a problem-based situation, a role play where you have to solve a problem, only you've got guidance and scaffolding. So looking at using, again, generative AI to make the non-player characters who are in that world with you much more interesting. And the third piece is assessment. We are not currently doing anything with assessment and generative AI. The assessments are kind of they're the advancement blocks. They're how you're showing mastery and advancing towards your credential at the end. They go through some pretty rigorous efficacy testing, bias testing, validity testing, and we don't yet have the rails around AI to help it make those decisions for you. So we're looking at that, and I think ultimately that will probably come into play, but it obviously needs much more guardrails if a generative AI is going to be part of deciding when you've mastered a skill or not, making sure that that's done properly. So that's where we are today. Looking forward to the rest of the discussion. There's another piece to our whole thing is we have a tool set as well. We've not yet integrated AI toolkits so that our partner authors could be building AI-driven products, but we're looking at that as well.
Wonderful. Thank you very much, Dave McCool.
Thank you.
We will move on to Brian Kane, founder and CEO of Social Purpose Corrections.
Well, thank you and good afternoon to everybody. I have a little bit different background, I think, than the rest of the panelists, but I come from a career in corrections. So I moved up the ranks. I was a warden at 5 prisons across the U.S., probably one of the most diverse experienced corrections leaders, became completely frustrated with their outcomes and decided not to be part of the problem anymore and be part of the solution. And I started the nation's first full service nonprofit prison company. So what does that mean? Basically, we're going to run prisons as a nonprofit, remove the profit motive, and actually bring humanity to one of our largest social challenges, and that's corrections. And so you may think, well, what does that have to do with ChatGPT? Well, quite a bit, actually. We're, as a young organization, as a nonprofit, challenging all of our corrections assumptions. We basically rebooted corrections and we're rebuilding it from the ground up. Pretty much the culture and the assumptions of what made our system it is today is a root cause of the problems. And therefore, if we don't think outside of that box, we will not change U.S. corrections. And so ChatGPT. I was introduced to ChatGPT by Christina because as the founder of Social Purpose Corrections, I'm in business development, I'm the hiring authority, I'm marketing, I'm social media, and I could go on. And clearly, especially with the challenge of changing U.S. corrections, which is pretty overwhelming by itself, efficiencies is important as we build our team. So ChatGPT, I started learning from just typing and putting information into it and see the results that came out. This might sound a little bit funny, but I put in there, if I were incarcerated and I was living in a cell with somebody who I didn't want to live with, how would I go about getting removed from that cell? Now, that would sound crazy, but I put that into ChatGPT and it spit out a set of 5 steps in order for me to, without violence, get moved from that cell. So right off the bat, I was like, and it was accurate. I was like, this is interesting. So we started to expand how we use ChatGPT. As you can see from the slide, it's my digital assistant. It definitely increases efficiencies because I can, we hired a returned citizen that overseas. We have access to no-cost private insurance for returning citizens. Well, we needed an employment contract. And we don't have a huge HR department because we're still young. And so I asked ChatGPT to draft an employment contract, put in the criteria that I was looking for. I asked it to write with a business tone, and it gave me a 2.5-page employment contract as a start. Now, clearly, we had to go through it, make it work for us. But if I didn't have that, and I didn't have the HR resources to help me, it took some research to come up with what that employment contract would have looked like. I had it done in a half hour. Went off to the attorneys, very few changes, and so I just increased my efficiency as an employer by using the ChatGPT OpenAI app. Now, also, it's when it says 24/7 availability, of course, it's an app, and you have the 4 option, which you have to pay to get access to. But if you don't, it's I think $20 a month. I highly suggest you do. Because it's more critical in its writing and its analysis of what you're asking. Because I'll put in there, for example, the ChatGPT tends to be a bit wordy and a bit fluffy in its language, and I'm more of a direct communicator. But I ask it to a business tone, or I'll ask it to keep it to 2 paragraphs, or ask it to summarize some information that I put in there, and it's excellent at doing that. So back to the efficiencies component of it, it's really made my life quite a bit easier. Need for upskilling and reskilling. Well, I had to personally upskill and reskill. As you imagine, coming from corrections is not exactly an innovative field. I quickly had to learn, and the lesson from there is it wasn't hard. It wasn't difficult at all. I had to explain. If you can go to the next slide, please. You can see, some of the cheat sheets on information that you put in there. And I will say that the majority of that I don't use. I just use common sense. I asked the ChatGPT, to keep it shorter, to be more concise. This is, we're running a nonprofit, so I use ChatGPT to do letters to funding sources. A little bit outside the employment side, but we just got a $1 million grant yesterday. And we use ChatGPT to write the first edition of the grant. It's a huge force multiplier for business or for employer. In our model also, we have, we're re-envisioning corrections. And so, in that re-envision, we have different staff members, within our model that don't exist in traditional corrections. An example is a culture officer. If culture is important, then make it important and put emphasis on it. Well, there is no example of a culture job description for corrections anywhere. And so we typed it in. I typed it into ChatGPT. Of course, we do have an HR support, and it spit out our first draft of a job description for a culture officer. A wellness officer is another position that we have for staff wellness and incarcerated wellness. Doesn't exist. There's no example. You can't find one because it doesn't, it's never been used in US corrections, probably any corrections. And it gave us the first draft, pretty accurate first draft of a job description for a wellness officer. So, those are a couple examples. But I think you'll find if you're not using ChatGPT, it's an excellent tool for you. You just got to make it work for you. Next slide. Modernize the workforce. Of course, within our model, the recidivism rate in our country is 2/3 fail rate. Part of that's due to education. Part of that, well, there's a lot of things involved with that. But the reality is in our model, we truly prepare incarcerated for jobs and for housing too, which is another root cause. But we've already started using ChatGPT to better understand how we can bring employers. Now, for Open Skills Network, we bring in digital badging into prisons, unheard of. And so we're going to certify skills inside, and as we write the badges, we can use, AI to help us develop those badges, which equal employment on the outside and the equal incentive on the inside. So, hopefully, as I give examples, now that's kind of employment because we're preparing incarcerated for employment upon release, because that employment is so important to them getting out, staying out, and being a good neighbor. I'll leave it at that. I think I met my 5 to 7 minutes, maybe a little bit long, but I'm definitely open to any questions. And AI has been a huge asset to us, and we will continue to use it, grow it, and bring it into corrections.
Wonderful. Thank you very much, Brian. And thank you, panelists, for your presentation. And we will open up the Q&A part of the presentation. So I'm going to start with a question for our technology/education panelists. Will we continue to need structured data and formats to represent skills in EdTech? So Dave or Nate, would you like to take this question?
I'll grab a first stab at it. So the idea of structured data formats, we often talk about the rich skills descriptor at the OSN, the RSD. And the idea of that is there's a URL that corresponds to a particular skill, and from that URL, structured data could be fetched for someone to be able to write software that interprets that skill and presents it in a various different concepts. But for me, the important part here is that there's a specific URL that multiple different actors in the ecosystem are using to describe a certain skill. That means that there's a word, it's like a word in language that you can use, and you can have assurance that when multiple different people are using that word, they mean the same thing by it. Often people are talking about how these large language models work as being able to obviate the need for this type of specificity by being able to translate from context A to context B very quickly, at least, can generate those ideas. But there's also a lot of reliability questions about, are we really talking about the same thing? The tools are just generating text that fits along nicely alongside a piece of text that previously existed. It lacks that specificity and intention of talking about the same thing. So I think that the value of open skills and structured data is what you make of it. When you build applications that take advantage of these specific references to concepts, and then you take advantage of the fact that multiple different humans are using those same references over time, such as between an educational program and a job description that are describing the same thing. I think there's a lot of potential to build applications that build on that specificity, and that potential does not go away even if we are augmenting some of our capabilities with the type of reasoning that LLMs tend to appear to be able to do.
Yeah, it's interesting. I sort of overlap with that a bit. So all the content we build, we map every skill that a student is being measured against is mapped to an RSD so that it can be interoperable. So we can go look out on the web and say, okay, what does this skill mean? What context is it useful in? So when I read that question, my first thought, well, of course not, because you can't replace that with a conversation. but maybe you can, right? I mean, if ChatGPT gets good enough, why can't it read and write databases? Why can't we just say this is detecting bias? Here's the core definition of it, or canonical URL for it, and then go figure out where on the web it also exists, and if it's in CTDL versus RSD, just do that conversion for me and don't think about it. So I do think there's actually a chance that could happen, but to Nate's point, they still need to do that fundamental job of this is what this thing is, and this is what it is equal to.
Right. So follow-up question, will AI encourage raw text to replace structure?
Not in a literal format, in my view. If ChatGPT was doing the job that the structure stuff is doing, it would have structured data underneath what it was doing. So that's my thought.
Right. I agree.
Awesome. And we have a question in the chat from Khaled. What is the possibility of creating content dynamically? I mean, a content that may contain text, images, sounds, and videos. What tools can be used to achieve this approach?
I think something what Brian mentioned in his talk was relevant here about the type of content generation that can be done within seconds now that previously might have taken many meetings with multiple different stakeholders to be able to decide. An example from my work was I was considering hiring a contract freelance writer to write just an example press release of what would it look like if I released a product with a certain focus. And instead of spending hundreds of dollars and having multiple meetings, one time I went to OpenAI's website and typed my prompt into ChatGPT, and I got back something that looked remarkably like a press release. Of course, almost everything that ChatGPT produces looks kind of like a press release or a bad LinkedIn post. But so that was a perfectly tuned example for that. But I was able to immediately get the feedback that I wanted that previously I would have spent hundreds of dollars hiring someone for. And so the content generation in various formats is exactly what this generation of large language model backed AI machine learning algorithms are producing, and different models are tuned to produce different types of outputs.
Great. Thank you, Nate. This question is for our employer panelist, Brian. As an employer, what role do you see AI playing in the post-pandemic business world when it comes to hiring new talent? Will AI skills be important?
I think if you understand my experiences in corrections, as an employer, my last prison I ran was 5,000 incarcerated and over 900 staff. So clearly a large organization. I think if we are going to evolve, and one of the challenges for corrections is to attract the younger generation. I forget ZY or wherever we're at on now, the younger generation to come into the employment field, we have to attract them. And the traditional way of hiring is the traditional way of hiring, and it's not appealing in our experience, in correction experience, to bring people in. So I think the AI is a helpful tool to us, and that's just it. It's a tool. It's not the tool. It's a tool as far as finding those that are employed. Now, I typed in, for example, ChatGPT. I typed in how can ChatGPT help for engage in employment. Job descriptions, writing, screening questions, interview questions, responses to inquiries, training recruiters, communication templates, and candidate engagement it's a response. I think it's all in line. Now, the challenge is you still have to interview people. You still have to find people that meet the skill set and the job description and responsibilities that you're looking for. But I think what AI does is the term I used earlier, and understand I served in the Marines, so some of my analogies are a little bit military, but it's a force multiplier. We can get a whole lot done a whole lot quicker, which will bring potentially better candidates in. And AI will help you screen applications and resumes. Now, that's not ChatGPT, but it will. We're working with a gentleman, a friend of mine, one of our team is working with a gentleman in Las Vegas, where AI is actually going to read people in an interview. It's going to read people in training to see if they're engaged. So I think the potential for AI to find the right people, the engaged people for an employer is going to be significant. Are we there yet? Probably not. But it's a huge tool for us. So I don't know if I'm answering the question or not, but I see it as a growing efficiency, a growing for employers, a growing capability that we didn't have in the past to find the right people for what we need.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
like this notion of AI as a force multiplier on every role of the organization. One of those roles being sort of the hiring role, crafting the job descriptions, interviewing, processing candidates, but then also all of the practitioners in the organization have the potential to be using these tools to be a force multiplier on their work. And for me, I think the interesting thing about what we're talking about using AI for hiring and building teams is that the thing that we're building is a team of humans that will work together. And so it's interesting to try and inject some machine learning into the process of putting humans together when ultimately we were going to work together using all the tools that we have to collaborate and all the language that we have.
Definitely agree on the force multiplier as well. I mean, everybody uses it. I mean, our content people use it to generate first draft of content. Distractors for common misconceptions. It's yeah.
Thank you. How will we control the bias that exists in the source data that the AI model is relying on?
It's good that we're having a lot of conversation about the understanding that bias, being able to measure that bias ideally. And it is worth noting that these machine algorithms produce iterative output and then have testing capabilities on each round of output to determine whether it is getting closer or farther away from some sort of fit for context and purpose. And so at one realm of the technology work that we need to do, we need to keep looking at these algorithms to ensure that we're putting energy in being able to detect untoward bias at that generation point in the iteration cycle, so that the iterations come out the other side that might have more positive outcomes. And at another level, we have to understand that why the bias exists in the data set and where it comes from. And so, having a college degree that's inflected with critical studies of various different disciplines is really helpful for humans to be able to understand how to work with the fact that our culture has a large data set that's been inflected with many different kinds of bias over time. And we can work as individuals to change that data set, put new meaning out there into the world that then trains the next generation of algorithms.
Great. Thank you, Nate. Can we use AI to control the bias?
So we're recursing now. It's a good question. I don't know. And I agree with Nate. Underneath it all, there's, we're all human and we all have biases. So to think we could create an AI that had no bias doesn't seem like an achievable goal to me, at least. I think it's just understanding in the various use cases you use it, where it's coming from. And that's why we've sort of stayed away from it for assessment so far, because it's kind of hard to know exactly the right way to deliver that in a way that is equitable, and that's a big part of what EDL and we are trying to do here. But it's interesting. So I think things like the tutoring application for us is nice because, we could give you tutoring experiences when we think you don't understand how, to identify patterns, for example. But we might miss, and we wouldn't know because we're not there with you, because it's all self-directed courseware. But if an AI is there, you can say, no, I didn't understand that. That doesn't make any sense to me. I don't understand that. And they can keep explaining to you in different ways, so you can kind of finally get the concept. I think bias is less of an issue there, not a zero, but it's certainly less of an issue there. But the AI lets the learner guide the tutor and guide to the answers that they need to get over the misconception or the lack of comprehension they have.
Yeah. It's worth noting these tools are largely open source at a layer. And so as developers, we can look under the hood and see, what is going on in here. We can run them on our own machines with different training data sets and report out about the varying outcomes that we get from different training strategies to use the tools. But fundamentally, there is this like black box in the model in how this generation of AI works, where you put some input and context in one side and some new content comes out the other side, and you don't necessarily know or have any ability to tell why this particular piece of content came out the other side. And that's a reality that we have to deal with when we're understanding these technologies and choosing how to deploy them. So it's great that there's a lot of conversation about responsible use of AI coming up in panels like this and in culture and journalism writ large.
Yeah, great call out. We have a question from Anna Maria. Can AI scrape the internet yet and give output based on real time?
Can it versus does it in a particular instance? I think we will begin to see tools that are doing that more and more. As many of the folks attending this panel might be aware, ChatGPT uses a snapshot of internet training data that is some months old and is periodically updated, and the algorithm is retrained on new data, but you're not going to be able to get it to comment on last week's news story. That's not a fundamental limitation of the technology. That's a strategic decision about how the tool is trained, and also potentially a cautious approach to creating some separation in the feedback loops to ensure the tools are being used responsibly. But it's not a fundamental limitation, and I'm sure that we will see more real-time engines, but those might be very expensive to run in terms of accessing all that data in somewhere close to real time. Right now, for example, the very large discussion site on the web, Reddit, is going through a bit of a user revolt around some API pricing changes that were designed partly to limit the ability for AI companies to be scanning the real-time conversations of members, or at least to monetize that connection, because the owners of Reddit felt that real-time conversation data and historic conversation data would be so valuable for training these algorithms that they wanted to capture some of that value.
Interesting.
Yeah, very interesting. So as an employer, Brian, how do you anticipate AI will affect job roles and responsibilities in your organization?
Excellent question. I mean, corrections is a human-based, occupation. It's not like a correctional officer can work remote. They have to be at the facility. So it's an occupation that really requires them to be on site. I mean, I'm excited about what Dave was talking about earlier about the coaching, and I think that's significant for the employment base and the incarcerated base. But if we had a tool where a new employee could ask a question to a device or to AI and get an answer and not feel intimidated, but they don't want to ask because they don't want to look like they don't know what was taught to them in the class or in the curriculum. So I think there's going to be some exciting movement in that direction. Incarcerated side, I mean, it's wide open. Anything we can be able to do, and a virtual coach to help somebody deal with an addiction or help somebody deal with a mental health challenge. And this is employment based because, again, our goal is to prepare them for release, which definitely includes employment. And so I think as the technology evolves, as society, and I have some problems with AI. I'll just be honest about it. I'm a little bit nervous about some of its capabilities, but as society either accepts it or not, I think it's going to be a huge asset. I mean, I've read articles, and I'm no expert, and I'm no tech guy, but I'm excited by some of the information. Articles where employers have 100 or 200 resumes. AI reads them and pulls out the ones that are best. So now you have to prepare your application based off of how AI is going to read it. So how is that going to work? Will I get an interview? Will I not? And so in corrections, I guarantee we'll see that in the future because we get a lot of applications depending on the job. Some jobs may not. But how is AI involved in that employment process? How is AI going to screen, again, back to the force multiplier, to allow a person to actually get an interview? And so I think as AI grows and develops, as employers like us, I think we're quite progressive on the correction space. We're excited about these opportunities and use them definitely to our benefit to change the culture in the United States. So we're excited. I think it's growing. We're open eyes, open ears, in order to learn. because, you know, if we're going to be effective, and corrections is one of those fields that has 50% vacancies. There's prisons that have 50% officers. They can't hire. You know, and the system does more of the same. You know, I'm sitting back there looking, you know, I'm not laughing because that wouldn't be appropriate, but cringing because they keep doing the same thing and expect different results. Well, AI is going to help us get different results. You know, it's you know, if we can learn, if we can be open, you know, and if we can deploy those strategies within our organizations.
Thank you, Brian. What are the most exciting developments you see in the AI field currently, and how might they impact education in the future? Dave, you're smiling. You want to answer
Well,
that
I
one?
think the most exciting ones are also the most, I don't know, concerning ones as well. I mean, AI is becoming, I don't know, more human maybe. You know, ChatGPT feels like you're talking to somebody. I think Brian mentioned earlier he felt like he was, or I think Nate, you were pair programming, and it does feel like a person. So I assume there'll be a temptation to give them jobs that people have now. They can be teachers, they can be tutors, they can be programmers. um, you know, it's hard for me to see exactly where that winds up because there seems to be a negative, potentially negative aspect of that as well. But and Will, it feels like the Chat GPT style AI is really becoming the AI everyone cares about, and maybe they'll just subsume all the other sort of stuff that's come before, maybe able to do everything that did. But I think it's becoming more like your partner, and is that a good or a bad thing? Probably both, I guess. I don't know. What do you guys think?
Yeah, certainly both, right? And what is exciting to me is the speed of our need to be able to respond to the developments in these technologies. It took society, you know, dozens to hundreds of years to truly respond to the printing press, but it will take us only, you know, a matter of months to feel the need to respond to these generative AI models that are conversational and are just so easily embedded in the processes that we're responsible for doing at work every day. And so what I feel is going to be necessary is that organizations will need to adopt adaptive strategy that is continual in terms of understanding that new skills are coming into existence, new practices are becoming possible, and that their practices as an organization need to evolve rapidly, maybe sometimes even more rapidly than the education system has time to name the new skills that are coming out. And so I think organizations that will be able to take advantage of these new developments will be the ones that are able to develop a robust practice of reflection on the skills that are being practiced in their community and those that are emerging, and a robust practice of recognition of one another within the organization in something that's continual rather than thinking of education as a preparation for a job.
Great, thank you.
In the correction space, I mean, education, you know, you heard me say it more than once today, is key to somebody, you know, returning to society and being successful. You know, and in many cases, the government will pay for maybe 2 GED instructors in a 1,000-bed prison. So they have this waiting list of hundreds of people that need an education and they have a 10-year sentence, and they don't get access to the education until the last year of their confinement. And they try rushing through, which is completely broken because they don't have the resources. So I think the benefit of AI in the education space for corrections is, you know, can they prepare people for a GED through maybe a tablet or through a coaching, model, you know, so that if they can't get access to the class, to the instructor, and they know they need help in math or science, you know, is there a way that AI can help tutor them or educate them to be prepared for the GED? Because if we all know, if you leave prison without GED, it's almost 100% recidivate, without exception. So you know, is there a way? I know that's a niche space, clearly, but you know, when we look at society, you know, and our challenges, corrections, you know, is a reflection of who we are. You know, and so I think there's some opportunity there, although it makes me nervous a little bit. It makes me excited at the same time, because I know the government isn't going to pay for more instructors. Corrections is too expensive is the way it is. So, you know, that aspect of it, I think, would be a huge asset to our country and to our society.
Yeah, that may feel like a niche use case, but it feels like it has perfect parallels to thousands of other use cases where there's a human limitation at present, often caused by lack of funding to fund 1,000 tutors for that 1,000 population prison. There's many other cases that will feel exactly the same, that might be unlocked by the ability to have that conversation with the AI tutor instead, even if that AI tutor is not yet as good as a human.
Good point. We have a question from Ian. He says, I am curious as to an estimate on where corporate America's mindset, so CEO, HR, talent acquisition, is with respect to adopting skills-based hiring in general. Want to take that one?
Who wants to take that?
My background's in private corrections. So, for those of follow the correction space, 8% of the beds in the United States are run by for-profit prison companies. And as a warden for a for-profit prison company, you are a business leader. You do traditional warden stuff, but you're CEO. You have EBITDA. You're responsible for profit, margins, loss. So it's a different kind of corrections, I guess, to put it that way. Anything that's going to bring about efficiencies in private business is going to be attractive, because those efficiencies equal profit. So, even on the correction space, if we can hire, if we're hiring 50 correctional officers and it takes HR 3 weeks of processing and AI can help them get it down to 1 week, that's attractive. That's going to help the bottom line. So I think, as my experience is a bit tunneled because of corrections, but I mean, the business aspect of it, I was responsible as the warden or the CEO of that prison to make a profit. And any tool that would be placed into my efficiency toolbox, I was attracted to it. Because that would just help the bottom line. Now I'm a nonprofit. I'm not motivated by those same goals, but the reality is it's still about efficiency. The better we can run our product, the lower the cost is for the government and for the taxpayers who are funding it. So I think business, you're going to see an attraction to any application that is going to generate revenue.
And so where do you as a CEO stand with respect to adopting skills-based hiring in general versus relying solely on qualifications? It's
the premise to our business model. Thanks to your introduction, by the way. It's the Open Skills Network, the skills verification. Those who are incarcerated and the staff who work within the facilities, if there's a tool and they're using the digital badge process I referred to a little bit earlier to validate those tools, because right now when somebody's released from prison, if you're tagged a felon, they're afraid of you. No matter what you did, they're afraid of you. Just because of your background, are you going to do it again? Do we want to take on that liability? And if we could come to them and an incarcerated comes out of a facility and they have 55 skill-based badges, verifications, validated verifications, as an employer, I'm much more comfortable, or would be much more comfortable in bringing them into our employment pool, to work for us. So it's one of the core strategies for us to change our culture is Open Skills Network. Now, corrections in general, it's nowhere. You will not find that anywhere in U.S. corrections. So we're going to model it, show the benefits and the efficiencies, to it, show how employers, we can build trust into those coming out of incarceration to fill all these employment gaps we have in our country, and they're everywhere. And those coming out of corrections are smart. People think, well, they're felons, they're bad people. Oh no, absolutely not. They're actually quite bright. They just didn't necessarily have the chances that we had. And so we're excited about that opportunity to completely change the culture, give them a fair chance, and take those jobs in our society that people are having a hard time filling right now. We're also bringing the digital badge into the staff. It's going to be part of our in-service training. We're going to build incentives into skill-based certifications for our officers that work inside of corrections. So we see, an ability, because we have to bring purpose to the job, and corrections in traditional corrections today, there's no purpose. A badge is not attractive to anybody. But the ability to help human beings is part of our genetic code. And if we allow them, to become better at managing incarcerated population to help them succeed in life, that brings purpose to the job. And we believe that the digital badge process, the skill verification process, is essential to make that happen.
Great, wonderful. Thank you. And thank you to Dave and to Nate for being excellent panelists. Great information today. And I will now turn it back over to Christian to wrap things up.
Thank you, Christina. And thank you to each of you who shared your time with us today and asked some great questions. But don't let this conversation grow cold. We want you to join the OSN and join our community of practice, and let's keep exploring together. A wonderful community full of resources awaits you on the OSN community platform, and we encourage you to join OSN and activate your account today. And thank you most of all to our amazing panel, Nate, Dave, Brian, for sharing your insights and experience with us today. You have just been an absolute joy to listen to, and I feel like I personally have learned a lot, and we appreciate you being here with us today. So be sure to check out our website for future events and then join us for our next community of practice. That's going to be on July 27th. We're grateful for all of you being with us today, and we look forward to creating with you a new and open skills-based world. So thanks everyone, and have a great rest of your day and a wonderful weekend.
Thanks.
Thank you. Bye-bye.